Good day, everyone. This is the third part of the discussions involving construction contracts and accounting for special transactions. That's the course. Now, let's proceed to presentation. So we are going to make this like concise as much as possible. For the presentation, there will be certain items that will be presented on the statement of financial position. And one of that is either we present something as, for example, contract asset or contract liability or receivable. Now, in this case, the options would be that because this is a sale transaction, or let's just say for services that we have rendered, so that's a service income, or we can even or also say still a sale. So in that case, remember our general formula or our pro forma journal entry or template is to debit whatever asset there is, and then we are going to credit the revenue or income. So that is our pro forma entry. Now, if ever, for example, we are going to render services or sell the goods on account, then we are going to debit, let's say, accounts receivable, but with if promissory note, so we are going to debit notes receivable. So basically, we are going to debit cash if on cash basis, but then if not cash, it's either any receivable. So could be accounts receivable if just the oral or verbal promise to pay. And then if, for example, there is a promissory note, so that would be a debit to notes receivable. So that's how it goes for the debit. For the credit side, we are going to credit an income if ever, for example, under IFRS 15, we are now able to satisfy the 5 steps in the revenue recognition model. And the last one is to recognize revenue at a point in time or over time. So granting, for example, that we are able to satisfy the requirements of IFRS 15 so that we are going to credit revenue. On the other hand, it is possible that we are going to credit another account, which is a contract liability. In that case, then, if, for example, we receive the cash in advance, but then no services have been rendered yet, no goods are delivered, and then we're not able to transfer or relinquish management control or substantially of it, or we're not able to transfer substantially the risks and rewards of ownership. So that's how it goes for us to be able to credit then a contract liability account. So the question now is, what about on the contract asset? Okay, we will see that later on this particular example or case as we go along the way. So allow me to go back to the upper part. Here are the definitions. So as what I've said, there's a contract liability. If, for example, we received the consideration or the amount which is due in advance, but then no services have been rendered yet and no goods have been delivered. On the other hand, there is a contract asset when, for example, there is still a condition as to the recognition of the revenue. So meaning there's still a condition attached as to whether there is a right for the consideration or certain conditions attached to the contract with the exception of passage of time. So for example, if we say interest, remember we earn that just because time has lapsed or passed by. So if ever there is again a condition, that's why we are going to debit that to an asset or contract asset and would retain as such until such time that the condition has been fulfilled or attained. Whereas for the receivable, this is really when there is no conditional right or there is, for example, an unconditional right. So it is unconditional if only the passage of time is required before payment of that consideration is due. So example, let's say this is to be paid for 30 days or to be collected after 30 days. So 30 days passage is clearly a passage of time. Therefore, that would not have impact as to the debit to a receivable, either an accounts receivable or a notes receivable. Then on initial recognition, any difference between the measurement of the receivable in accordance with PFRS 9, which now governs our recognition and measurement principles for the financial instruments, both assets and liabilities. And the corresponding amount of revenue recognized shall be presented as an expense. So example of that would be impairment loss. Let's just say that the amount of the recoverable value to the receivable is lower than its carrying amount. So there is impairment loss. And you can refer that under IAS 36, impairment of assets. We have an illustration here for contract liability and receivable. If we go to the journal entries, I will just go directly to this one because anyway, we will be mentioning the details from this part. So for January 1, no entries are there. This is when the contract has been made. So no entries because no transactions clearly have been entered into that would affect the accounting elements. Whereas on January 31, 20X1, this is the time that clearly the contract provided that the customer will pay a consideration of 1,000 pesos in advance on January 31, 20X1. If it is a cancelable contract, meaning that is still dependent upon the provisions of the contract as to the fulfillment, so it wouldn't involve an entry here. But on the part of a scenario B, for example, if it is non-cancelable, so we are going to debit the receivable account because there is really a right to receive, but a contract liability has to be credited, as what I've said in the introduction, because, well, there is still an obligation to perform the obligation. That is, in this case, to perform the service of installation of a gate. Then by March 1, 20X1, so this is the time that we are going to debit cash and contract liability if cancelable. So if you can notice, no receivable yet. And then again, it is a cancelable contract. So anytime the construction company can get out of it. So that's why we have to be safe here. But for the receipt of cash, so it will be a contract liability. But if non-cancelable, so there is what we can see here by March 1, 20X1, there is the payment. So we are going to debit cash and then we are going to credit the receivable to close it, which is an entry that we have known from accounting 1. And finally, on March 31, 20X1, if you can notice, the entries are the same. So debit or close the contract liability so that it will become part of the revenue. All right, so that's the point there. Then what if a contract asset? So example here is that there is a condition that the customer will have to pay the total consideration only when all of the 1,000 roof tiles have been installed. So we have to analyze though, anyway, if the problem is silent, that this is a performance obligation that will be satisfied over time because there has to be an installation to be made and it is to be made over a certain period of time. All right. Then in addition, if we have to be standard like, so this is because the performance of the construction company, that is ABC, will create or enhance an asset that the customer controls. And then as the asset is created or enhanced and ABC does not have an alternative use over this asset. And ABC has an enforceable right for the payment for performance completed to date. So this is, in other words, based on the progress of the contract. Then here, we can look on the requirement that we will have to debit the contract asset and credit the revenue by January 31, 20X1. This is, by the way, non-cancelable, so no provision here, meaning the parties cannot get out immediately by or from the contract. Otherwise, they will have to pay penalties, which should be bigger to protect both parties. And then another concern would be for February 7, this is the time that we are going to close the said contract asset because by February 7, the remaining tiles have been installed. January 31, 20X1, 800 roof tiles have been installed. So that's why we have to recognize revenue and the contract asset is to be remitted because still there is a condition. When the condition has been fulfilled, so we debit the receivable and then we close the contract asset to recognize the revenue. And when the collection happens, so that's why we are going to debit cash and credit the receivable. So in this case also, we can say that, for example, if the collection was prior to February 7, so we are going to debit cash and then we are going to credit, let's say, if no condition has been fulfilled, so, or it's not yet fulfilled, so we are going to credit the contract liability. So when we now recognize the receivable by next time, so we have to close both contract asset and contract liability. Okay, so that's the point also here that we have to take note. All right, so here are the reminders. If the consideration is received or becomes due before the goods are transferred, so we have to recognize a contract liability. If the goods or services are transferred but before the amount of consideration or transaction price is received, there is a condition, so a contract asset. If unconditional, a receivable. Then take note that PFRS 15 allows us to make use of any other account title for both contract asset and contract liability or other accounts. So that's why, for example, in lieu of the contract liability, we can have advances from customers. This is true because we received cash advances or money from the customers. All right, so that's also one thing that we can take note. Okay, so to proceed, we have the accounting for construction contracts, and these are now on the journal entries. The contract price is 1 million. ABC is the company. When the company received 100,000, so we will have to credit contract liability. Well, because this is for the construction of building, and then we received an advanced payment yet. All right. So we can also make use of advances from customers. By the way, we are on the part of the seller or the contractor. Then the contract cost will have to be added, the actual, by the way, to construction in progress and credit cash or any other appropriate asset account. So the construction in progress account is actually that account that will accumulate all contract costs. And we also have to add profits, but recognize the losses to date. So there is an emphasis of the word to date. That's why the amounts are cumulative in nature. Then, assuming that the estimated cost to complete as of the year end are as follows. So 500,000. Now, how do we compute the gross profit? We always have to take note that, again, the amounts to be filled out of this format will have to be cumulative in value. And because this is the first year, so that's why the cumulative balances are equal to the year-end balances, or let's just say for the period ended balances. So how to, this is the format. All we have to do is to memorize total contract price. So this is the revenue less the cost equals the estimated or expected gross profit from the contract. What are these estimated total costs? You know these, the cost incurred to date and the estimated cost to complete. Then we have to multiply the expected gross profit by the percentage of completion so that we will get the gross profit to date. And we have to deduct the gross profit earned in prior years or previous years to get really the gross profit for this year. So that's why I've said that from this point up to this point, the amounts really are cumulative in nature because we will have to deduct anyway the gross profit from prior years. This is also to incorporate the impact of any prospective adjustments in the said contract throughout the years. We've said that projections can change or estimates can change along the way. What about the revenue? So the revenue is contract price times the percentage of completion at 375,000. So no revenue from prior years because this is the first year. So this would be the revenue for the year, right? So the revenue cumulative is equal to the revenue for the first year because, again, that's the first year, no balances prior. Then cost of construction will have to be 300,000, which is the actual cost incurred to date, less the 75,000. That's going to be the gross profit for the year. So this is how we compute cost to cost method. And for example, if we will have multiple years, so we'll just have to follow this format and we deduct the gross profit earned in previous or prior years. If there are any changes to the values like contract price because of any variations, I'm announcing this in advance. Or for example, there are also items that change here with the cost. So all we have to do is to incorporate. And the percentage of completion should be the revised one also or as well. Then under cost, the cost of construction as expense will be equal to the actual cost incurred to date. Or if we deduct the cost of construction in the prior years, but if this is just for the years, of course, cost of construction or actual contract cost incurred for that year or during the period. All right, and this is now the adjusting entry that we have to make. So debit the cost of construction, and then the CIP will have to reflect if ever there is gross profit. So we can notice it is an addition here because again, the gross profit will have to added or to be added rather to the CIP account. And then this is the revenue. Then another one, ABC company bills the customer for the work performed on the contract. Now there is a no condition attached to this. So we assume this is unconditional, which also means that for this to be conditional, this has to be written or provided in the problem. So we'll just have to debit the receivable, which is actually the squeeze amount. Progress billings is actually based on the percentage unless it is given in the problem like the value. So it is possible really that the progress billings may not be equal to the construction revenue as computed. So we have here, and then we deduct the contract liability, the advances, so that the receivable is the remaining balance. So we'll have to debit contract asset here if ever there is a conditional right. All right. So progress billings basically are the billing statements, or just like electric bills given to us if we use electricity from any electric company or business. So in this case, we received for the amounts billed by the contractor to the or for the customers or customer. So whether or not they have been paid by the customer. So that's why the progress billings, let's say for example, may not necessarily equate to the value of the receivable or the contract asset immediately. If ever, for example, there are advances, just like in this example, we can notice that's the net amount or value. And then there could be so many things that would be considered here. Progress billings again may not be equal to the percentage of completion for that period. Another one will be what if there is retention. So it's possible that the progress billings are not to be paid completely because certain conditions attached or specified in the contract will have to be complied with before the customer will pay to us. I would say us because again, we are assuming here that we are the seller. So that's why this is 90% because of the 10% retention. So debit cash and credit receivable. What about the financial statement presentation? Remember we said that IAS 11 have been superseded by PFRS 15. So entities under IAS 11 will have to record assets for unbilled accounts receivable when revenue is recognized, but not billed. So of course, that's the normal thing. We debit the receivable, we credit the revenue. And then once the customer is invoiced, the unbilled receivable is reclassified as a billed accounts receivable. On the other hand, billings in excess of costs are recognized as liabilities. So it's possible that the billings that we have made actually are greater than the cost. So that's why we have to recognize as liabilities because we have to recognize that we need to perform more than when we or than what we have billed then. However, we have to recognize because there can be possibilities of changes about that, most especially that we have discussed like contract asset, contract liability, and etc. So under IFRS 15, so we have to recognize the assets for unbilled accounts receivable when, of course, the billings are actually made here, right? That's for letter D. So bills the customer for the work performed on the contract. Then PAS 11 or IAS 11 requires the entity to present the gross amount due from customers. So meaning we have receivables from the customer as an asset or the liability to perform more. Due from customers will have to be the net value of the cost incurred plus the profits less the losses and minus the progress billings. And due to customers will be, of course, same formula, but it's just that this is now the liability. So meaning the billings exceeded the costs and the profits, pluses and the losses minus, meaning the CIP balance. So I am mentioning this in advance anyway, that when the CIP exceeds the billings, meaning the contractor or us performed more than what we have billed, then there is an account which is the receivable amounts that will have to be recognized, that is called the due from customer account. So this is a receivable. On the other hand, there is also an account due to customer in which the billings have exceeded the CIP balance. The CIP balance represents the portion of the contract that we have already performed. So that's why we have to recognize a liability. And then under IFRS 15, as what we said, because of the terms contract asset or contract liability, or we can also add more account titles. So that's why we have to recognize, as what I've said again, that progress billings will have to be recognized together with the recognition of a receivable, for example, or a contract asset. Then the discussions involving PFRS 15, which are already done. So here, to summarize, the provisions of IAS 11 and 15 are similar or somewhat similar. However, under PFRS 15, the timing of the reclassification of an amount from contract asset to receivable may differ. All right, so that's going to be due to customers. So there is still an obligation on the part of the company to perform more because the billings have been greater than the CIP. Contract asset again is due from customers. All right. And here is a sample financial statement, statement of financial position showing the current assets, receivable and contract asset, and the contract liability under current liability. So both are current because they are to be settled within 1 year or exactly 1 year or less. All right. So here are also another set of journal entries that we can take note of. Contract price and the contract cost and the estimated one. So case number 1 is if ABC company bills the customer 50% of the contract price in accordance with the billing as agreed, and case number 2 is 25%. We prepare the journal entries. So for letter A, this is for the actual contract cost incurred, and to compute the gross profit for the year, you have to recognize them and memorize them. So we have the total contract price, and then we also have the items that follow. So we got the gross profit 80,000. This is first year, so this is easy. And then to compute the revenue for the year, that is actually the 800,000, which is the total contract price times the percentage of completion, 40%, 800,000. Contract cost is 720,000, so the gross profit is the same here at 80,000. And this will be our adjusting entry. So debit the cost, and then debit an addition to CIP for the gross profit, and we credit the revenue. Some would be using construction revenue, and here would be construction cost. So they're the same. Now, what if there is a billing at 50%? So this is 1 million, and then receivable. This is now the contract asset. We can notice that the billing exceeded the performance that we have made, the CIP. Therefore, there is a due that we have to recognize. So this is now the contract asset, which is actually a conditional right that we have to take note, because that would still depend on the performance that we are going to make. But the performance that we have already rendered or made, so we have to, of course, debit the receivable account. Now, for Case number 2, which is 25% billing. So that would be a debit to receivable, and then that's at 800,000. And then we are going to credit progress billings, which is at 25% of 2,500,000, and then credit contract liability at 300,000. So this is the obligation to transfer goods or services for which the amount is due from the customer. So this is still actually an obligation, because remember, once the contract has been finished or completed, then that's the time that we are going to recognize the transfer of the liability to revenue. Or we can also say that it is still an obligation because the asset has to be completed, and once it is completed or furnished, that's the time that we are going to turn over to our customer. Okay? Whereas the first one is contract asset because of a conditional right for the said performance or the finishing of the contract or completion. Then requirement for statement B, statement of financial position, so receivable here at 800,000, CIP as said 800,000, progress billings 1 million. The contract asset is 200,000, which is the difference between the billed amount and the receivable, the CIP, which is equal, so 200,000. And then contract liability is 200,000 then at 50% billing. So that will be, again, the due to customer. So we have to perform more. Then for case number 1, this is how it is shown on the statement of financial position, or the values are shown. Then in this case, there is a note and disclaimer portion here. Actually, this part here just discusses that the author strongly believes that contract assets and contract liabilities have to be presented at gross amounts because they are actually not to be offsetted, as they are separate types or groups of assets and liabilities. However, this is just the professional opinion because PFRS 15 does not address the offsetting. So that's why the contract assets and liabilities have to be presented at, of course, gross amounts. But then I've met also some interpretations of the authors that if, let's say, they belong to the same package or they have the same economic characteristics, then they can be netted with each other. So we just have to connect the dots, meaning if, for example, they do not belong to the same package, which are different contracts, then we assume that they are. So we are going to present them separately. But if they belong as stated in the problem, so we are going to, for example, segregate them as it is. Then if same, then we are going to combine or present the net amount, either an asset or liability, on the statement of financial position. Okay, so PS 32 allows the offsetting though, but then again, PFRS 15 does not provide. So in that case, we just have to follow PFRS 15 provisions, and then if no provision, so respect the interpretation of the author in this case. Anyway, this paragraph or part here just discussed that although we have said contract assets and contract liabilities, however, they're not under IAS 32 to begin with because they're not specifically identified as financial assets and financial liabilities. All right, so as a consequence also of the issuance of PFRS 15, wherein PS2 inventory is mentioned about for the service provider, like a construction contractor or a construction company or business, that there is the so-called work in progress for really the service that is yet to be completed or finished, that is ongoing for or toward completion. But then PS2 actually removed the said exclusions, scope exclusions for work in progress arising under construction contracts. It is because this one is specifically provided in IAS 11. But when IAS 11 was removed, So of course, PAS2 will have to remove the exclusion of the work in progress arising under construction contracts because this has to include them or such. I hope that is clear. So I repeat, IAS 11 has been removed. So PFRS 15 now governed everything. And then this has been excluded under IAS 2. Therefore, IAS 2 has to remove the exclusion. All right. So that's the point of this one. And then case 2, the values as being shown, which are also similar to case number 1. And then the statement of financial position. If under subsequent periods, for example, these are the cases of changes. So as what I've said, all we have to do is to make a table or construct a table. Then we have to memorize from top to bottom. We don't have any choice or case. However, we can just make use of acronyms if we would like to. For example, for total contract price, we can just write DCP or CITD or estimated cost to complete, that would be ECTC, just to be able to minimize the time, most especially in examinations. So these are the tips that I can provide you. And we can, of course, interpret this as follows. Contract price, if you can notice, is the same all throughout. No change of scope, no variation. For cost incurred to date, it increased because of additional costs that were incurred. From here, 2,760,000 plus 3.54 in millions, and then 500,000 additional contract costs. And then you can also notice that estimated cost to complete is 0 at the end of 20x3. So that is the point, or that is actually the illustration. It is because the contract has been completed and no more estimated cost or additional costs that are needed to complete the contract. And then these are the percentages of completion. Then gross profit earned to date, and then earned in prior years, so that we will get the gross profits for the year or years. All right. Also, this is the revenue that will be recognized. So if you can notice, this is same as percentages of completion, 40%, 90%, and 100%. By the way, if the problem is silent and the contract is good, for example, for so many years, like 3 years, we assume that it is at 100% at the end of the 3 years or whatever period is given in the problem. Then that is 40%, 90%, and 100%. So we simplify and we deduct the cost of construction, which are actually the cost incurred to date. And therefore, the differences are the gross profits for the said years. In addition, we can also realize that the difference of percentages of completion actually are the work or works done for the respective periods. So 90% minus 40% is 50%. 50% times 9 million is actually 4,500,000, which is the revenue for the year. Remember, revenue is actually for the period ended balance. It's not accumulative balance, but for the sake of illustration, it is shown here to date. Then also here, the difference is 10%. So 9 million times 10% is 900,000. And we deduct again the cost of construction to get the gross profits for the year. All right, so that's the end for the third part, and wait for the fourth part for output methods. So thank you very much for listening, and then God bless to all of us.